Welcome to another Peugeot Super Mini. And I say another because the French manufacturer has been building these 2.0 something models since the 80s. Back then it was the 205, now it's the 208. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that they might be starting to run out of ideas. Actually, far from it, because this latest 208 is one of the best cars that Peugeot has ever made. And don't just take my word for it, because as you can see from the sticker proudly displayed in the rear window, this is the 2020 Car of the Year. So it's very clear then that after the okay but not outstanding 206, 207 and first gen 208 models that Peugeot isn't messing around with this one. And nor can it afford to, because rivals include the Vauxhall Corsa, the Seat Ibiza, the VW Polo, the Skoda Fabia, the Ford Fiesta, to name but a few. Question is, should you buy one of these? Along with its striking styling and choice of exterior paint colours, the 208 also has a bold range of engines. Unlike some rivals, it still offers a diesel variant, plus there's also an all-electric version called the E208 that, thanks to its 56 kilowatt battery, gives a range of up to 217 miles. Now, small car makers have a very difficult job when it comes to the interiors on little Super Minis like this, because the design has got to be striking and exciting, but it's also got to be functional as well. And I actually think Peugeot's done a very good job with the 208's interior, because you've got this kind of dual level angular dashboard design, you've got the central infotainment screen which is positioned towards the driver, and the very unique Peugeot iCockpit, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. As is the case with a lot of press cars, this particular 208 is the highest spec you can get. It's the GT Premium, but that doesn't mean that lots of the nice bits of this cabin don't exist in all versions of the 208. So across the board, you still get things like this nice carbon effect dash design, you get the soft touch materials on top of the dash, and you also get these nice piano style keys, which aren't just very nice to look at, they're also intuitive to use as well. As for technology, we all know Peugeot's very good at putting lots of tech in its bigger cars, but the good news is that the 208 has now been included in that. So, across the range, you get plenty of tech in this car, and especially on the GT and the GT Premium models, they're really packed with goodies. So we've got this central infotainment screen. It's 7 inches as standard, and it's 10 inches on GT spec cars upwards, and it's pretty good. The graphics are really nice, they look very smart. The software, it could be a little bit more intuitive and it could be a bit slicker when you're going through the menu systems, and it has actually crashed on me a couple of times when I was using the Apple CarPlay. But teething problems, I'm sure that's not something which is going to be permanent. It's worth pointing out as well that you can use the voice control to do some of the functions on here, which is good because there is the climate control switches which are all integrated into the touchscreen. So unless you use the voice control, you have to start delving into it when you're on the move, which of course isn't ideal. The sat-nav, that's also worth a mention because it uses TomTom live traffic updates, which are in general very, very accurate, and it lets you know where all the big jams are so you can navigate around them seamlessly. And this is actually one of the only small cars that I can think of that includes a top-down view of the car for when you're parking, and you can see it on the screen now. And although it's only 180 rather than 360, it is still quite handy if you're quite nervous about parking this thing. One thing that really sets this car apart, and I've got to mention, is the 3D digital instrument cluster, which is standard on the Allure Premium spec upwards. And it's worth getting, not just because the instrument cluster that you get on lower spec models isn't anywhere near as nice, but also because of the amount of information that it shows you and the way it lays it out. So you can have your fuel range, the speed, navigation, all that sort of thing displayed right in front of you. But it's done with this 3D effect, which hopefully you'll be able to see on the camera, but you'll certainly be able to see it if you take this car for a test drive. That means that it's really attractive to look at, but it's in no way distracting either. It's quite hard to describe it, so you need to see it for yourself. But honestly, it is something that's unique and it looks fantastic.
If you need in-car storage, the 208 has plenty of it. The wireless phone charging pad can be hidden away, plus there's a large space underneath for other items. Space under the armrest is ample, while the door pockets are a decent size. It's only the pokey glove box that lets the side down owing to the placement of the fuse box.
Other things that are worth mentioning, because this car is so high spec, so if you want it, you can have this panoramic glass roof. It doesn't open, but it does allow lots of light to come in. We've also got a massaging driver's seat, which is quite good if that's the kind of thing that you like in your little Super Mini. One thing, the passenger seat, you only get the height adjustment on that on the GT spec car upwards, so bear that in mind. And you also can't get lumbar support on the passenger seat at all, which is a bit of a shame, but you can get it on the driver's seat, but it is quite expensive. Climb into the back of the 208, and the bad news is that if you like the 3-door version of the previous generation car, there's no more 3-door. It is 5-door only, which is more practical. The only thing is though, is that these doors, they don't open that wide. So if you had say a child seat or a child, it might be a bit hard to kind of thread them in through that narrow gap without banging your elbows. But once you're in here, it's not bad at all. It's quite competitive with rivals. I've got enough headroom, even though the panoramic roof does take away some of that, although it's only really in this forward bit where you notice the difference. And there's enough room widthways. There's a couple of nice USB points down there. I've got a net behind the driver's seat and just about enough knee room behind my own driving position. And as a reminder, I'm 5'10", so about average height, and it's not bad. I think though, if you were taller, this hard plastic backing on the seat, although it moves away to give you a little bit more room, if you did have your knees against that, it would be quite hard and uncomfortable. I quite like these little touch button lights you've got up here, which are quite neat and a little bit better integrated than you usually get on cars of this price. And also Isofix points on the outer rear seats and another one on the front passenger seat as well.
The 208's boot space is reasonable at 311 litres, yet it does lag behind cars such as the Renault Clio, Seat Ibiza and VW Polo. There's also no adjustable height boot floor, so just bear that in mind. What it does have in its favour though is the size of the boot is constant regardless of whether you opt for the petrol, diesel or electric version of the 208, and that's because they made this car with all versions in mind from the beginning. The Peugeot 208 is far from the only Super Mini in this sector, so to give you a bit of context, I've highlighted its three main rivals. First up is the Renault Clio. The exterior hasn't changed much over the last decade or so, but the interior certainly has, boasting a slick, functional design packed with technology. Next up is the Ford Fiesta. One of Britain's favourite cars, it never ceases to deliver with a brilliant drive and much improved interior. Finally, the VW Polo represents 1/4 of the VW Group's Super Mini range and gives buyers a taste of premium car characteristics in a compact body shell. So, there's the rivals, now back to the 208 and what it's like to drive.
Now the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to driving the 208 is the Peugeot iCockpit design, which I mentioned earlier, because it is unlike any other brand of car currently on sale, because instead of looking through the gap between the center of the steering wheel and top of the steering wheel to see the dials, instead you look over the steering wheel. So the steering wheel sits down lower, which is supposed to be less tiring on long journeys, and it's also quite a small wheel, so it almost feels like you're driving a dodgem car. Now, some people might not be happy with this setup because it actually ends up with them not being able to see the dials before, so it is absolutely essential that you test drive this car before buying it. I know that sounds obvious, but some people don't, so you really need to take a test drive to make sure you're happy with it. But I've got to say, I quite like it. It is easy to drive, it's a nice wheel to hold on to, it's a good size all round, and I can see the dials really, really clearly. The only real complaint about the driving position in this car, or the view that I've got from where I'm sitting, is that the A-pillars are a little bit chunky, so the blind spots are a little bit bigger than you might think for a car of this size. The engine in this particular car is the 130 horsepower 1.2 litre PureTech 3-cylinder petrol. And if you're swapping 4 cylinders for 3 cylinders in your small car, then this will sound quite unusual. It's got a really rumbly, warbly engine sound, which is actually quite good fun. And the thing I like about it from a refinement point of view is that it never sounds like you're really thrashing it. It's a very deep sound, but it never sounds like it's been absolutely caned. So it's always actually fairly quiet. I'm currently doing mid-40s fuel economy, so 45 miles per gallon, which isn't too bad, but actually it was doing more when it was delivered. It's probably just my driving. When it was delivered, it was doing over 50 miles per gallon over quite a long distance on the trip computer. And that comes in spite of it having some surprisingly sprightly performance. I mean, 130 horsepower doesn't sound all that much, but actually this car has plenty of go when you need it. So all in all, I really like this engine actually, even if it is perhaps a little bit more powerful than it technically needs to be. What I'm not 100% convinced about is the 8-speed automatic gearbox. What's good about it is that you've got that 8th ratio, which is more than most cars of this size have, so it's very good at cruising on motorways. The engine's already quiet, but with that 8th gear, it means it's turning over the engine at an even lower speed than normal. But it's when you start going at lower speeds or you start crawling around town that the gearbox does sometimes get a little bit stumbly, and it's not as responsive as perhaps you want from a car that will often be driven in cities where you need that response right away. I think it's probably no more than a software issue which just needs ironing out, but on this particular car, yeah, it could be a bit smoother, and I think a DSG box from the Volkswagen Group would do a better job. And actually, unfortunately, you can't get the 6-speed manual with this 130 horsepower PureTech engine. As for the rides and the refinement, when we said the refinement of the engine is very good, and that actually goes for the whole car. It's a squeak of wind noise, but it's none more than you'd expect for a Super Mini in this price bracket. The rides, well, obviously this car's on the 17-inch alloy wheels, which is the largest alloy wheels you can get with the 208 because this is the GT premium spec car, and they do have an effect on the ride quality. So at high speeds, it's actually very composed. This is a really good cruiser for a Super Mini. But at lower speeds, and especially going over sharp bumps and expansion joints in the road and manhole covers, it can feel just a little bit sharp and it can sometimes crash through them. But on the whole, it's not too bad. There are sporty spec Super Minis, rival Super Minis, that have got a firmer ride than this, even with their larger alloy wheels. And actually, talking of sporty Super Minis, if that's what you're after, then I'm not quite sure the 208 will be for you, because compare it with something like the Fiesta or even the Clio, and it feels more top heavy, and it's harder to feel where the grip is through the wheel. And I wonder if that's slightly to do with the unusually sized steering wheel, but it just doesn't quite inspire as much confidence, and it doesn't feel like you can throw it around as much as you would with the Ford Fiesta, for example. However, the flip side of that is that when it comes to driving this car around town and driving it slowly and doing slow speed maneuvers, it's very good indeed. It's got a good turning circle, and because the wheel is so small, you can apply lots and lots of lock without really having to do too much with your hands. And I quite like that. It means it's an effortless car to drive. You really don't have to try too hard just when you're, piddling around, which is good. It doesn't ask too much of you.
Driver assistance on the 208 is also worth a mention, not least for the sheer amount of big car tech available on this little Super Mini. Semi-automatic parking assist, blind spot monitoring, adaptive cruise control and high beam assist are all options, while traffic sign recognition, active lane keeping assist and Peugeot Connect SOS are all standard across the range.
If you are looking to buy a Peugeot 208 but you're not quite sure which version to go for, then here is my top 3 choices. For the cheapest one available, it's the 75 horsepower active premium spec. If you're a company car driver, then look at the all-electric E208, or if you do more miles, the blue HDI diesel version. Finally, if you're a performance car fan, then the bad news is that there's no 208 hot hatch anymore. The GTI will not be coming with this generation of car, but I suggest you look at the E208 electric version because that will surprise quite a few people off the line.
There's no doubt that Peugeot's latest Super Mini shows the French brand is back to its best when it comes to making small cars. With a strong, diverse range of powertrains, huge tech offerings and knockout styling, it's got more than enough to take the fight to the ever-popular Ford Fiesta.
The only thing I would say is that I think you need to be quite careful with the spec of this car, because this top spec 130 horsepower version is pretty pricey. I think the best value comes when you get the 97 horsepower 1.2 litre PureTech with the manual gearbox and of course this Faro yellow paint, which really stands out, and then get it in either Allure Premium or GT spec. If you do that, I reckon you've got a very accomplished Super Mini on your hands.